Meet Today's specialist. She's a former National Security Council staffer under both Presidents Obama and George W. Bush. She's also a Fox News contributor, and she's vice president with the Jones Group International, a national security firm. But she used to specialize in being a professional ballerina. Miss Jillian Turner is here. He's a radio talk show host. He's spokesperson for the Boys and Girls Club of New Jersey, also a proud alum of Saturday Night Live, but he specializes in all things New Jersey. Joe Piscopo is here. Thank you both for being here.
Sir.
Yeah, just a little bit.
I didn't tell you that.
Oh, no. Wait until we get into the back half of the show. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of those twirling days. But, Jillian, you obviously have a deep and long history and understanding of these national security concerns. One thing that struck me that came out in the news today, the leaks, and Kat will talk about that in the next block some, but the leaks caused grave national security threats, so much so that for a minute it looks like Britain was maybe chilling on their communication with some of their intelligence, and Theresa May came out very upset at that New York Times leak that came out. So how can we address the leak issue as it relates to national security?
Well, that was a clear reprimand from the British. Subtle, but it was definitely a reprimand, and the closest they've come to doing something like that publicly with the United States in a very long time. To just address Manchester for a second. So we've now seen 1 week 4 terrorist attacks spread across the world. You guys were talking about this endemic problem of terrorism. I think what this week highlights for us is that while most of the world's attention has been focused on ISIS in the last 3 years, and rightly so, other terrorist organizations continue to thrive and proliferate around the globe. Al-Qaeda is now operational in more countries than it's ever been. We've had the Taliban, major resurgence in Pakistan this year. Organizations in Africa, like Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, are creating havoc in that region of the world. And so I think while it's right to focus on ISIS, we got to keep this picture broad, and I think that's what General Kelly was trying to remind folks in his remarks the other day.
Joe, is it whack-a-mole, to Jillian's point? I mean, if we put all our resources in annihilating, I think is the Trump administration's word, on ISIS, do we then open ourselves up to the dangers of these outspurting groups?
Yeah, you got to shut them down now. That's why I have to say, and on the radio every morning we talk about it. People are backing the president, man. They like that he has this travel pause. That's the least you can do. We've had it. We're done. Shut it down. It's cyclical. Every week something happens. No, excuse me, every 24 hours. Yeah. Look what happened with the Christians. There's a slaughter of Christians. No one's stepping up. And I speak on behalf of the radio audience, kind enough to listen to us every morning, man. They are ticked off. You gotta shut it down. And this intel leak, it goes to British intelligence, it goes to United States intelligence, goes into the deep state. The deep state tries to take Donald Trump down, like Donald Trump's gonna look bad. What they're gonna do is keep Donald Trump in office for 4 more years.
You know what's going on also, Ebony, is that this ISIS video that we mentioned, yeah, they highlight Europe and specifically say, you know, go ahead, attack them at their homes, on the roads, in their gatherings. But they also put up a video of Las Vegas. Now, this is a big weekend. If we need to really understand something else, too. Ramadan starts tonight, depending where you are and whether the new moon is out tonight or tomorrow night. Ramadan starts beginning likely tonight, and they're stepping up these terror attacks. I would think that it's coinciding with the beginning of Ramadan.
Absolutely. Not only to target Western cultural events and religious events and things like that, but to target people in the Muslim community, too. We've seen how vicious and non-discriminating, crazy, you know, radical Islamic terrorists are when it comes to their victims. Another thing I wanted to point out, what Eric was talking about a moment ago, about having the moderate Muslim community step up here. This is part of President Trump's idea that he outlined on the trip this week, to have a NATO sort of Arab counterpart, to, for all intents and purposes, an Arab NATO. So this is a coalition made up of Western allies that are Arab practicing nations, and they are going to help not only fund this, as we've seen countries do, but to help actually put some boots on the ground, as an aphorism, and to really put some skin in the game here. And this is going to go a long way towards quelling some of that.
Right. I'm glad you brought up skin in the game. That was my question to you, Kat. I'm glad you brought up skin in the game, because there's a lot of people resisting President Trump for various reasons. But in this moment, right, in this moment, where it's literally us and our way of life against some of those in this world, what do you think we can do collectively to support this president, at least in the common thread of defeating and annihilating these terror threats?
Well, I think something that President Trump is doing explicitly, which Jillian was kind of touching on, which we haven't really seen as much, is he's really looking at this as a global problem. Not just NATO, but he's going to Saudi Arabia and he's talking about terrorism in extremism in Saudi Arabia, which was incredible, and I know we've talked about that in the show a lot. It has to be a combined effort, because there's nothing in terms of anything on this earth that will stop these people. We saw this in Manchester. They had the best security there, and they just created a soft zone for terrorism right outside of it. So in terms of a lot of these policies and a lot of these security features, they can make us feel better. But when you're dealing with someone like that, when they're planning on blowing themselves up, things like that aren't really going to work.
Well, although Joe points this out, when you are dealing with this element that is hell-bent and fanatic about killing the Western society and killing our way of life because we're the infidel, then I think you have a case to be made to say, hold on, let's hold off on some of the travel from these countries of origin that are feeders for terror, like Libya, where this terrorist family came from originally. And you hold off, and you're not saying you can never come here. You're saying we need to step up our vetting process. We need to make sure that whoever's coming in here isn't planning on blowing up one of our schools or our concerts.
You know what, Eric, I don't think, again, most Americans have a problem with that. When you lay it out like that, and first of all, Jillian, you know better than me, that was, Obama's administration had those targeted geographical areas as well for that same reason. I don't think that's what most
so how did it get bad when Trump did it?
I'm going to tell you why.
It's the way he rolled it out himself with the rhetoric, made people turned off by it right away. And they just
when he originally talked about Muslims as a general ban, that was probably imprecise. I'm going to give him a tiny bit of benefit of the doubt and say he wasn't being as careful and as articulate around the issue as he would have liked to have been, and as we've seen him be since. But for some people, it's hard for them to forget it. Now, I'm going to say in this moment, and tell me what you think about this, Joe, I think maybe we need to not forget it, because we shouldn't forget anything the president said on the campaign trail, but refocus on what we need to be doing collectively as an entire society that wants to defeat this threat.
Yeah, because also a big shout out to the big Muslim community in New Jersey. Eric, you know that. Great Muslim Syrian Americans. Yeah. But what we ask is, as Americans, when I hear from the radio audience, is what is the end game for the terrorists? What is the end game? I remember as a kid watching the Munich massacre. What has the PLO accomplished since then? All those years. The message has to be sent. You will accomplish absolutely nothing. We will win. You ain't taking us down.
but not from us, Joe. It can't be Joe Piscopo bowling or Ebony and Kat and Jillian. It's got to be from within the moderate Muslim community that has children too, that has children at risk as well. If they blow up people here, even if they're Muslim or moderate Muslims, they're still Americans. They still want to kill them. They die too. But there's silence. There's silence from within this community.
But therein lies.
There's not complete silence among moderate Muslims.
I'm telling you, listen, I spent an hour on the CARE website. That is the go-to PR group for moderate Muslims for integrating into American society. Council on American Islamic Relations. They had nothing. They absolutely did not push back on any of these bombings yet.
I think what you just laid out, Eric, actually, I know you didn't intend it this way, but it underscores to me, from a policy perspective, what was problematic with the original version of the travel ban, and to a certain degree, the current version, which is precisely the countries that we target in this ban for practical purposes in this country. As you say, we don't want people coming here who are not sympathetic to Western culture and Western way of life and actually are seeking to destroy it.
Yes.
That is true. But these are precisely the countries that we need the most in the fight against terror. We need their voices, we need their money, and we need their arms. And so by alienating them in the way that this was rolled out,
we don't need Yemen. We don't need Libya.
But I would argue that we do. We don't need them from a security bare-bones perspective.
We need Jordan, we need Saudi Arabia, we need the United Arab Emirates, and we kind of have them. That's where it's got to come from.
I disagree. I think we need the nations laid out in the travel ban. Actually, in a way,
Yemen doesn't even have a government. Yemen, who are we dealing with in Yemen?
But it's not about the government. It's not about, people made the argument that we banned folks from those countries from traveling here because they don't have a government in place at home. But that's exactly the reason they're trying to come here, to seek refugee status.
We're going to talk a lot more about it, guys, because it's deep and it's layered.